From the book of Galatians chapter 5, verses 1 and 13 through 25. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, do not submit again to the yoke of slavery. For you are called to freedom, brothers and sisters, only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for self-indulgence, but through love, become enslaved to one another. For the whole law is summed up in a single commandment. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. If, however, you might devour one another, take care that you are not consumed by one another. Live by the Spirit, I say, and do not gratify the desires of the flesh. For what the flesh desires is opposed to the Spirit, and what the Spirit desires is opposed to the flesh. For those who are opposed to each other prevent you from doing what you want. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not subject to the law. Now the works of the flesh are obvious: sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, sorcery, enmities, strife, jealousy, anger, quarrels, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, carousing, and things like these. I'm warning you, as I warned you before, those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. By contrast, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against such things. And those who belong to Christ have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live by the Spirit, let us also be guided by the Spirit. All right, guys, I haven't done this in a really long time, like years and years, and so I'm really happy to be doing it today. I'm also really happy that some people are out of town and it's a smoker group. That they'll have to critique it. I'm not lying. Lauren, come. Listening. Okay, so the bulk of this text that I'm going to talk about is from Galatians. And let's see if this goes through. In Galatians, we're seeing that Paul's referring a lot to Isaiah. He knew he had like this heavily Jewish audience, and that they knew all the Old Testament scriptures. And Isaiah talked a lot about fruitfulness and fertility. And so when Paul's writing this, it's about 15 years after Jesus died. He's sending this letter as a way of countering a lot of missionaries who were saying, these Gentiles can't just come in here and start doing their thing and be saved. They have to be circumcised, they have to live by the law. This newfangled thing that's going on does not count. They've got to follow our rules to be saved. And Paul really hammers on the freedom that is found in the indwelling of the Spirit. So I'm sure you guys have all heard this before, but these various definitions of the sins of the flesh, I just wanted to talk through some. I'm going to write some of them on here. And shout out to me when I put these up here, because there's so many different translations of them. When you hear these words, what are some of the things that you think of? So he starts his list with debauchery, which a pretty good definition for that is drunkenness. What else do y'all think of when you hear the word debauchery? Anything?
Totally give you over to something.
Okay. Like that.
It's like a catch-all type term, I guess, for me.
Yep. Just bad things. All the bad things. You're bad.
It's like shenanigans.
Shenanigans. So good.
Yes.
Shenanigans.
It's probably for me one of those words that the first place I heard it was this text. And so not knowing what it means, just knowing that it's bad.
It's just bad. Yeah. No, you got the debauchery.
I think NIV is supposed to be an easy to read translation.
Right.
Debauchery.
Some words just carry like the heavy badness of themselves. Okay, impurity. I put adulteress. Anything y'all want to add to that? Okay. Greed. Say again, greed? Greed. Like that. All right. How about idolatry?
Worshipping idols?
No, that's wrong.
Greed again.
Say again.
Greed again.
Greed.
Interesting how all idols serve to take on the form of the economic.
like when we see the idolatry a lot among God's people, it was typically stemming from like some sense of panic, fear, anxiety, like could we really trust that God was going to do what we needed him to do? So like, let's just cover all of our bases, and like, if this one thing could maybe take some of the anxiety or insecurity away, like we'll also just, make something referent to that so that we could just make sure maybe just in these projects that we really need this.
That's what we used to say, the Canaanites, the Israelites and Canaanites. Yeah, God's a great God of deliverance, but can he grow cold?
Right? Like, we're just not sure, Daryl. We're just not sure. Okay, enmity. When you hear the word enmity.
I'm gonna say this makes it a lot more accessible for someone who's learned English as a second language, so I
Wow.
appreciate that.
How do you say you're welcome in French? There you go. Enmity, I put like deep-seated dislike, hatred. Yeah. Yeah. I was reading a translation that said whether covert or obvious, either one. All those things we don't say, we still smile. When we see
Yeah, to
something.
me, it's even deeper than usual. How do you get there?
It's like you wish bad things for someone, right? And when this word is used in Galatians 5, some of the other places it's used is when God said to Eve and the snake in the garden, I'm going to put enmity between you. I mean, it was a pretty hardcore. And then also refers to like we need salvation because there was enmity between God and us. It's like a pretty hardcore, like there was no good in between something with enmity. All right, factions. That was another one. Factions.
Conflict.
It's good that these were just, for Bible times and not like any relevance to today. Conflicts, pot stirs,
Picking sides.
picking sides, yeah,
Tribalism.
yeah.
Good old fashioned division.
Agreed. Dissension.
They're the same.
Yeah, poorly. One way, one of the commentaries I read translate this was it's division that does not seek reconciliation. Like, I don't care if we.
Politics here.
Yeah.
I'm reading one right now that says competitive opposition.
Oof. Yeah, it's not that competitive. Like, I don't want to just disagree. I want you to be wrong. I want you right. Okay.
I'll speak with Terry, she said churches.
Ooh, Terry Bird. Yeah. All right,
She
Chad.
is for you, like she shouldn't be second.
If you wanted to. Sorcery. I mean, this is pretty.
I like that. Wait, is that the one that's witchcraft as well, or is that a different word?
Nope, same one.
Okay, that word I know a lot about, not from personal experience. Actually, from personal experience, it's the word pharmakia in the Greek. My name is a pharmacist. It's meant to use a drug. It's or get drugs.
Yeah.
I think of like voodoo, putting a hex on somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, and back in their times, there was some of that. A lot of it was they didn't have medicine for healing. You could trust God to heal you. These people are like, I got this thing that will work. All right, carousing is our last one. Carousing.
Looking for a fight.
Such a fun.
It is such a fun word, Daryl. Can't be bad. Looking for a fight. It's also sort of a catch-all for me, or it was like debauchery. Like, you're carousing, I know exactly what you're doing, but you're out there like,
You're rowdy.
you're rowdy.
Troublemaker.
Troublemaker, yep, I like that.
Perhaps uncontrolled.
Yeah. I liked one commentary I read, Charles would want me to add a lot, this was from Scott McKnight, who's one of his professors. Carousing means indulging in one's appetite excessively. It could be food or drink, or including the overuse of our appetites to want all the time. We want cars, food, toys, jewelry, insurance, appliances, travel, housewares, clothing, tools, movies, and other media. We carouse with others in advertising and in media when we want more for our appetites. That was interesting commentary on that word. Okay, so just for fun, let's rank these in general. When you think about Christianity or society as a whole, how do these go from best to worst? Like super sinning to like, that's not that bad. Like, let's start with the worst. Like, what is the worst?
You start.
Adultery?
Mm-hmm. So we'll make that as the number one worst. Okay. What else do we think? What else would you? Enmity. And obviously, this is going to be different from all three of it.
So did we start with the number one being the
What's
worst?
the worst?
Okay.
Tim's like, man,
Debauchery?
that's called a Saturday.
I think it's interesting because I would love to see how we would each rate those ourselves instead of all together. Because I think it depends, it may depend
Right,
how you see things.
right. Do we all agree on what's the least worst?
Sorcery? I don't know.
I think
Carousing-ish, okay, 9 or 10. 9 or 10. 10. All right, and when we look at, and you may have internally ranked those a lot differently than we just did. What do you notice about how we ranked those? When you started thinking through that in your mind, what do you notice about why?
I just noticed it was much harder than I thought it was gonna be. I started thinking about it, and oh gosh, I don't know.
Yeah. What makes us think that one thing is maybe less worse than another?
Experience?
Yeah, tell me about that. You've been on the receiving end of one of those, or?
Something hits home, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I give a little different perspective on that?
Of course they are.
I almost, I look at this like, I look at the opposite of fruit of the Spirit. Fruit of the Spirit is singular, it's one item, it's one thing that's made up of these different components. And I see the works of the flesh, although that is plural, I do see that as one thing made up of different facets. So in one sense, they're all the worst together. That's actually what I was really having a problem addressing.
Yeah, I feel like when I start categorizing these, I tend to go in what would affect me the least to say that that was bad. Like, I'm not going to choose something if it's something I would struggle or experience more or want to justify, I guess, more than others. I'm like, well, idolatry's, I would want to put it as bad, or sorcery. I'm like, those people are so bad, because that doesn't really require any self-reflection on that part. Anyone else want to make a comment that you notice when you start ranking these either out loud with us or internally? Okay, well, you can keep thinking about it. All right, so let's talk about Paul's intention and his audience a little bit more. Of course, Paul wants all the individuals in the Galatians church to hear his words, but he's really speaking to them as a community and as a whole. He knows that the hope, I think, of the story of Jesus being passed on for generations is in the local church. Well, so when we read this, it's not like we're reading an email with one recipient. He's writing this to a whole bunch of people, probably even several other countries or churches were being grouped into this. It wasn't mass communications, there was nobody preaching on it, and the most likely scenario is that there weren't very many literate people in the group, so a couple people who could read would read these letters and everyone would have to sit and listen to them. It was probably this local church. When we say that, we're not even thinking what we would think of as a local church, maybe we would. A few families, small groups, small communities, they were in someone's home or some similar, very small, cozy space. Probably a really motley crew of people, most illiterate. So I think what Paul's saying on this, he's concerned that if his families and neighbors and small groups of the circles of people we share life and community with can't put aside some of these things and grow in awareness of the fruit of the Spirit, that the church isn't going to bear fruit. I think he knows what we do when we live in community with other people, that we all have different feelings about things and rank things differently. But he's really saying it to a group and not an individual. He's starting to kind of scratch that itch there of some of these things were individual. A lot of them are things that are really more done in community, especially when we get to the fruit of the Spirit. I think the good news and the best news is when we talk about the fruit of the Spirit, that we don't have to discipline ourselves into obtaining all these fruits. I think I've always panicked when we sing the fruit of the Spirit song, or I see this list, because I just think, oh my gosh, like, I need more discipline. Like, I need God to save me from the sinful flesh, and I just leave feeling like, why can't I be more self-controlled? Why can't I be gentle? Why can't I be peaceful? All of these things. And the fruit of the Spirit already exists fully, and I think really our job is to make space for it and increase our awareness of it. We don't have to strong arm ourselves into anything, which makes me very thankful that it's not the fruit of trying really hard, the fruit of our best plans and efforts. The fruit of the Spirit tells us that all of these fruit exist when we are aware of the Spirit's help in our lives. And I was reading Beth Moore's study on Galatians, and I like that she says, we would be dead wrong to conclude from all of this that our bodies are bad. Think about it. It's precisely our bodies that receive the Holy Spirit and experience the wonders of God. The problem is not in our bodies, but our habitual choices to not surrender to the Spirit's authority and direction. By the Spirit, we experience the life of Jesus in our bodies. I think that's so beautiful. When we ask the Spirit to bear its fruit in our lives, we experience the life of Jesus in our bodies. So we're not just stuck in this broken, bad flesh that is just going to evaporate. And we may be living like beta version 1.0 of the flesh, but I think we know that when the Lord comes, he is renewing us, and that our bodies isn't bad. There's just no way he would have sent Jesus to live in a human body if he thought this is all that the human body and flesh was capable of. I think if he sends his son to live in a human body, he's saying our bodies are good and meant to be good, and the Spirit dwells in them. So let's have another little share time. We ranked the flesh earlier. I want you to take a minute. I'm going to give you a minute or two. If you want to scribble on the back of a piece of paper, or just think it in your head. Let's go through the fruit of the Spirit. I'll read those again, although I may know. The Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So some of y'all were here last week, some of y'all weren't. But our speaker talked about the concentric circles of your lives, where if you're at the center and you draw a circle around yourself, and then let's say you put family or job or spouse or whoever is in your next ring of life, and then maybe the next ring after that is neighbors or extended family or whoever comes next, and you keep going out until you kind of encompass all the community that you live in. It might be helpful for you to draw some concentric rings like that, or just think about it in your minds. When you consider those concentric circles, where do you see that you're challenged by the fruit of the Spirit in community? What's a fruit you would like to grow in more in an area of community? So if we think about Paul is writing this to communities and not just to individuals to figure out how they can all be better at these things, but as a community, how can the church live into the fruit of the Spirit and increase our fruit of the Spirit? How can our families, how can we as extended families, or people we mentor, or that we are co-workers with, or that we interact with on a regular basis, how do we in those community spaces grow in the fruit of the Spirit? What's one fruit you would like to grow in an area of community? And what do you think is keeping that group in your life from experiencing more fruit of the Spirit? So just take a minute or two to reflect on that, and I'll come back to you. All right, what are some of y'all thinking?
Faithfulness.
Yeah, tell me about that.
That seems like a fair one. Good practice of not being in control. I'm sure you've heard, faith without works is dead and all that kind of stuff. And it's good practice to like let it go. And I love worrying about or trying to preface things and see if I can change the outcome or something. I gotta let that go. And it's a big practice and it's tough. It's very hard and scary. But hey, sometimes things work out and it's awesome.
I had similar thoughts to that, and I put more in patience. Being faithful for sure, but in the patience of, I want to control my kids' walk with the Lord, or Michael's walk with the Lord, or like what's going to happen, or we have friends, and I would control it all. And so just being patient and faithful, and just saying, I can't, it's not me. I want to say that.
Mine's probably similar. I was thinking patience and gentleness. I'm kind of a fixer. It's how I'm wired. So a lot of times I'm prone to try and fix something versus just hearing someone out and just really just listening. And being gentle in response, because again, I'm more prone to, well, there's an issue. There's got to be a range of potential fixes. Let's choose one to move forward. Without just being more gentle in my words and letting it play out. Yeah, maybe it's a little faithfulness as well. Just it's not about me to fix everything. But some community, that's something in their hearts. We can just gently listen.
I guess for me, the whole thing is the pride place in the fruit of the Spirit is love. And not just that it's the first thing in the name, I think it is the fruit of the Spirit. Everything else is a manifestation of that. And as I'm looking at this right before, you talk about works of the flesh and fruit of the Spirit. Paul says, for the whole law is summed up in a single command, that you should love your neighbor as yourself. However, you might devour one another because you can be eaten up by one.
That's such an interesting thing to stick in there. Like, if you do bite one, like if you are like this, don't totally destroy it.
Yeah, and so, it keeps coming back to that for me personally, is because if love is not the emotional thing, but it's the actual giving up of your own self-centeredness for the benefit of other people, then faithfulness, and kindness, and patience, all of that plays into that. And it's really interesting that the same writer talks the definition of love in 1 Corinthians 13. It sounds an awful lot like this. An awful lot like this. And so that's, for me, it boils down to that.
And I think he he was probably singing the Jews a little bit with this, so they know that the sum of the law and the prophets is to love the Lord and love others. Like he's trying to remind them, it never says, the sum of the law is this long list of things, but. Anybody else feel challenged by the Spirit in an area of community in your life?
Yes.
Absolutely.
I was just thinking, like, that's a real hard one, of community. And, like I was talking about earlier, I like to, whatever, and think or say or do or say that, but just kind of have to be
Yeah.
and be available and then try and stay in these fruits of the Spirit to be able to help.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I definitely was thinking a lot about the gentleness component of things and Charles and I went through some of this yesterday. I mean, our family life can just get kind of insane, and there's points of the day where we get super irritable and impatient with each other, and the kids will snap at us or talk rudely to us, not Ryan, but just his sisters. And just the girls. And I think, man, like, I can't believe they're talking to me like that. And I'm like, well, I kind of can, because none of us are gentle with each other. And I don't like it when there's just this, I feel like, communal spirit in our house of irritability and frustration. And that starts with us, I think, turning towards the fruit of the Spirit more to foster gentleness. One of the quotes I read over these commentaries said, "Gentleness is strength fully submitted to God, knowing when to sit at the table and when to flip it." Gentleness is strength fully submitted to God, knowing when to sit at the table and when to flip it. All right. Guys, thanks for letting me share with you. We're going to close with a little time of contemplative prayer. One of the things I really liked in a Richard Rohr book I read recently that talked about contemplative prayer was the way to the fruit of the Spirit begins with contemplative prayer. And I think it doesn't begin with just like, I've got to quit doing these things and quit doing more of this thing, or I've got to make, because my default is, okay, I should be more like this, so I should read a book about that, or I should like make a plan or make a list, or it's very rarely, even honestly in planning for this lesson, that I was like, the answer is that I should sit and be still, let God tell me what he thinks I should share or focus my thoughts on for this, because that's such a waste of time in our busy lives to just like sit and think about things when we could be doing. And I think that's why we fail so often in turning our awareness to the fruit of the Spirit that Jesus has promised is already dwelling in us when we accept the Spirit into our lives. So for this contemplative prayer time, we're just going to spend 3 or 4 minutes. I want you to think of a fruit of the Spirit that you want to spend some time in silence of. And you sit quietly, you pay really good attention to your body being still, your breathing in and out. And just think of that word. If you want to say it in your head over and over again, you don't have to finish with a plan. You don't have to finish like knowing how you're a changed person. All I want is for you to ask yourself, how is God bringing awareness to me of that fruit of the Spirit? Not just personally, but in my communities. When I think about those concentric circles of my family, my workplace, my neighbors, sports teams, whatever it is that I'm involved in, how can I bring awareness of the fruit of the Spirit to my communities? Because I really believe that Paul wanted us to know that was the hope of the gospel, was that in community we would live out the fruit of the Spirit. I'll enter us into prayer, and then I'll close us in just a few minutes. Dear Lord, we bring our very busy brains and our very busy hearts and our very busy bodies to you and offer them in stillness and quiet and in peace. as an offering and an invitation for you to tune our hearts and our ears and our brains towards you in a moment of stillness. Lord, I pray that it would feel so good to stop our brains and our hearts and our bodies, that we would feel drawn to do it more, that we would feel refreshed and renewed, even in just a few minutes of silence and contemplating just the really good things that the Spirit brings to our bodies. Lord, you gave us these bodies, you called them good, you've put your Spirit in them. We experience the life of Jesus in these bodies, and we want to be more aware and less hurried and pulled aside by all of these other things, and bring our full awareness to what is the Spirit wanting me to do in the communities where I live and work, that I could bring more fruitfulness to those places.